Welcome back to session 2. We're carrying on where we left off. In this session, we are going to be doing money and banking, globalization, and environmental deterioration. So in order to master the topic money and banking, you must be able to briefly discuss the aims of the monetary policy, briefly discuss the monetary policy instruments, provide an in-depth discussion of the basic functions of the central bank, explain the aim of the South African Reserve Bank's monetary policy, examine the central bank monetary policy by focusing on the instruments used by the South African Reserve Bank, and critically evaluate the inflation targeting policy of the South African Reserve Bank. So let's have a look. Money and banking. So, the South African Reserve Bank, or SARB, was founded in 1920 with the primary function to protect the value of the rand. It is a private company that exists because of the mandate issued in the Constitution of South Africa. The four general banking functions of the South African Reserve Bank are as follows. It is a bank of issue. Number 2, it's the government's bank. And number 3, it is the custodian of gold and other foreign reserves. And the fourth one, it is the banker of other banks. So as the bank of issue, the South African Reserve Bank has the sole right to issue notes and coins via its subsidiaries, namely the South African Note Company, printing of banknotes, and the South African Mint Company, which does the minting of coins. As the government's bank, government departments deposit their funds and withdraw them at the South African Reserve Bank. They provide loans and foreign exchange to the government, and they offer financial advice to the state. As the custodian of gold and other foreign reserves, the country's gold and foreign exchange reserves are stored with the South African Reserve Bank. As the banker of other banks, cash reserve balances, a portion of the deposits that households and businesses have in commercial banks may not be lent out. This portion is a percentage known as the cash reserve requirement. And that cash reserve requirement is then held with South African Reserve Bank. Bank of settlement. Banks owe each other money when checks are paid, and these checks are cleared daily by the South African Reserve Bank, something which is now outdated. Lender of last resort. Should commercial banks require cash urgently, they can borrow from the South African Reserve Bank. Supervision. The Registrar of Banks at the South African Reserve Bank ensures that banks are managed in terms of the Banks Act and the capital and liquidity requirements are met in order to maintain good bank management. So you must know these four functions and be able to explain each one. The monetary policy function. Monetary policy consists of decisions made by the South African Reserve Bank to influence the interest rates and the supply of money in the economy. The aim is to ensure economic growth, the constant value of the rand, price stability, and increased employment. Right, so how does the monetary policy aim to achieve its objectives, which is to ensure economic growth, the constant value of the rand, price stability, and increased employment? They use these monetary policy instruments in order to achieve that. Right, so the first one, the interest rate changes. When prices are too high, the repo rate is increased so that commercial banks increase the interest rates that they charge households and businesses. This leads to less borrowing and spending, thereby lowering the amount of money in circulation and so therefore lowering prices. So when we say when prices are too high, that means inflation is increasing. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to dampen the economy, so they increase that repo rate, so then it makes credit more expensive. So people are not that willing to spend money or to go and enter into credit agreements, right? So less is being spent, less demand taking place, so prices start coming down. And obviously the opposite occurs when economic growth and employment levels are too low. So as you can see at the moment, our repo rate is very low. It is only at 7%. So that is because we're in a situation where we are trying to get the economy to grow again and to increase employment. So now they want to encourage spending. Secondly, your open market transactions. When prices are too high, South African Reserve Bank sells more bonds. The SARB holds onto the money that they have received from selling these bonds. So what they're doing is they're taking the money out of circulation. And obviously, when the economic growth and employment levels are too low, they will do the opposite again, right? So then they will buy back those bonds. Moral persuasion. SARB can appeal to banks to morally assist in either increasing or decreasing the amount of money in circulation by lending out less money when prices are too high and lending out more money when economic growth and unemployment are too low. So moral persuasion, they will only go to that if they can't really do anything to change interest rates, because they don't want to harm the consumer, because interest rates will immediately harm consumer. So then they will just say to the banks, please be a bit more careful. And then your cash reserve requirements. Banks are obliged to keep a certain percentage of their deposit as a reserve with the Reserve Bank. And then by increasing or decreasing this percentage, banks' ability to create loans is affected. Obviously, when that cash reserve requirement is increased, then they have less money that they can then give to consumers in terms of loans. Right, bank failure. Bank failure occurs when a bank is unable to pay back the amount of money that it owes its clients and other banks. The reasons for bank failure, there are 5 reasons. It is the credit risk, liquidity risk, interest rate risk, investment risk, and the capital risk. So your credit risk. Banks lend out money to households and businesses, and when borrowers are unable to repay their loans to banks, banks fail to meet their own financial obligations. So that's the risk that they take, right? They give out the loans, they're not sure if they're going to get that money back, and if the people don't pay them back, that is then when they can't meet their own financial obligations. And that's exactly what we saw with the 2008-2009 economic downturn, when the banks in America failed, was because of this reason. They extended loans, people didn't pay them back on time, and they had to close. The liquidity risk. If a large depositor withdraws their money, other depositors may become concerned and will also withdraw their money, resulting in the bank being unable to give back everyone's withdrawals at the same time. When people rush to go and withdraw money, this is also known as making a run on the bank. That's another term that they use for that. Interest rate risk. If banks have not prepared for a drop in interest rate, this can lead to failure, because banks now receive less interest income and depositors may withdraw their money because the lower interest rate does not benefit their savings as before. You see, low interest rates only benefit the creditors, right? The people who have credit, they benefit from a low interest rate. But if you somebody who is depositing money and saving, you don't benefit, because now you're earning less interest on that investment that was made. The investment risk. Banks invest some of their funds, and sometimes these investments are not successful and they lose their funds. Same with individuals. We make some bad investments and we lose our money. Capital risk. Banks must maintain a certain amount of capital. If it does not, shareholders can sell their shares. And when depositors see this, they panic and they withdraw their deposits. Because what it's saying to them, if the shareholders are not secure with what's happening in the bank, then they also get out. Now, the consequences of bank failure. Depositors can lose some or all of their deposits they've made with the bank. Shareholders can lose some or all of the value of their investment in the bank. Unemployment will occur because bank employees will lose their jobs. It causes uncertainty in the economy, which leads to lower spending and investment, thereby leading to a recession. Right, the consolidation questions here. Give one word for each of the following descriptions. Acronyms and abbreviations will not be accepted. The policy used by the Reserve Bank to influence the supply of money and interest rates. We just heard now that these are the two instruments used by the monetary policy. You don't have to write the word policy there because it says the policy used. So it's the monetary policy. The interest rate offered by commercial banks to their most deserving clients. Now be careful here. Many students, they just read the interest rate offered and they immediately write the answer because they know the only interest rate they know about is the repo rate. Another name for that is obviously repurchase rate. But in the repo rate is what SARB lends to the commercial banks. But the question here is asking you the rate offered by commercial banks to their clients. And that is the prime lending rate, which is a little bit higher than your prime lending rate is a little bit higher than your repo rate. The total value of all goods and services produced within the borders of a country within a specific period, that is your gross domestic product. Please note, you can't write GDP. It will give you no marks. You've got to write it out in full. Briefly describe 3 monetary policy instruments. Now already here they talk about interest rates and supply of money. So you already have one of the instruments. But there's the interest rate changes, the open market transactions, the model persuasion, and the cash reserve requirements. There's 4 of them. You only have to write on 3 of those. Discuss money as a medium of exchange and storer of value for 8 marks. Right? Now, if you remember, you did the functions of money in grade 10. So as a medium of exchange, it is the most important role. Workers exchange labor, shop exchange goods, factories and farmers exchange goods for money. As a storer of value, because money is generally acceptable, there are always individuals, producers and households who keep money. Money as income is kept to make payments when goods and services are purchased. Money that is not spent remains part of the personal wealth of the individual or business. Money is also stored as wealth, but its value decreases over time. Right. The South African Reserve Bank has functions and responsibilities that are not performed by other financial institutions. Discuss the following functions of South African Reserve Bank: Government Bank, Bank of Issue, and the Bankers Bank. And that is for 8, 16, 26 marks. And then the second part of the question is, how will the President of the Reserve Bank apply monetary policy to influence the amount of money in the country for 10 marks? Important here, your answer must meet all the requirements for an essay type question as it appears in section C of an economics paper. Right, so tips for answering essay type questions. Your introduction to your essay has to define or explain a key concept used in the question as an introduction and expand on it. guard against saying what you are going to discuss. Do not start off by saying, in the following essay, I will. You do not do that. Under no circumstances should you use the question or part of the question as the introduction. For your body or your main part, to earn full marks, 26 out of 26, for this part of the question, the candidate must use appropriate subheadings where applicable. 1 mark is awarded per subheading. Each subheading must be further explained or expanded and motivated in full sentences. Provide appropriate statistics and or examples to each subheading if applicable. Beware of repeating any facts. If in doubt, provide as much information on the topic as possible. You can earn up to a maximum of 8 points for lower order facts such as headings and examples given. The additional part requires higher order answers. The additional question may require knowledge outside the official curriculum, which indicates that candidates should be aware of current economic events. Citing one's own opinion, the critical evaluation of economic situations is common. Candidates must also be able to explain phenomena using graphs. Candidates can earn a maximum of 10 marks. For your conclusion, must be answered as a higher order question. Candidates should guard against concluding their answer by repeating the question or information already contained in the answer. The concluding remark can refer to either the body or main content of their answer, or the additional part of the question, an own opinion, a possible solution, statistical data, or a critical summary can also be given to gain your 2 marks. Something to keep in mind, do not try to guess what you can get. Rather make sure that you know all the essay type questions of a certain main topic, macroeconomics or economic pursuits. If you therefore know all macroeconomics essay type questions, it will be easier to do questions 2, 4, and 5. If you know the essay questions of economic pursuits, questions 3, 4, and 6 might be more suitable for you. Mark allocation for essay type questions are 2 plus 26 plus 10 plus 2, which will give you your 40 marks. So what we're saying is you do not have to know all the essays. You can look at only studying macroeconomic essays or only economic pursuits essays. Right. This is now the answer to the question that you were given. So please, can you see there the way the main part is written? There's a heading, but as you will see, there is no mark given for government as banker because that was what was asked in the question. So you're only given marks for the discussion. The same for bank of issue. You're not given marks for the headings here, for the subheadings, because that is part of the question. Right, so if you look at your 10 marker, there is way more than 10 marks there, but this is where you can't really foresee what a learner is going to say, so therefore they say they accept any other correct relevant response. And then your conclusion, same thing, accept any other relevant conclusion, right? It is not those are the only answers that exist. Right. So that brings us to the end of the term 3 work, and now we're doing term 4. And please bearing in mind, we said that for term 4, we're only going to look at essay type questions here, okay? So in order to master the topic globalization, you must be able to define and explain the relevant concepts, define foreign direct investment, discuss the World Trade Organization, known as WTO, examine the causes of globalization, analyze the consequences of globalization, and compare the North-South divide characteristics. Once again, you're talking North-South, you're talking developed, developing countries. Right, so let's look at globalization. The definition there, the breaking down of the trade barriers to promote the free movement of goods and services, labor and capital to form a global economy. Characteristics, there is trade, which is increased through improved transport and communication, internationalization, through foreign offices, trade representatives, networking, multinational corporations were established, also known as MNCs. Regionalization, regions cooperate economically. Example, we have the European Union and we have BRICS. And remember, BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, making up all your southern countries. Key infrastructure, communication infrastructure, radio, satellite, computers, transport infrastructure, aircraft, trains, ships, right? Those are your characteristics of globalization. The causes of globalization. Transportation, increase in number of transport systems, the movement of goods and people, reduce the distances between countries. Communication, the arrival of computers and the internet, much faster way of communicating. Trade liberalization, right? The reduction of trade barriers between countries, meaning opening it to more free trade. Multinational enterprises, or MNEs, international companies that are not bound by their country's borders, example, BMW, Vodafone, KFC, etc. International capital markets can invest money anywhere in the world without government intervention. Foreign direct investment, known as FDI, when one country establishes a business enterprise in another country. Globalization leads to an increase in FDI. Trade agreements, there is the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, there's the World Trade Organization, and then there's the Millennium Development Goals and the Free Trade Zones. The consequences of globalization. Now, there are positives as well as negatives. So if the question asks you to analyze the consequences of globalization and they don't specify, you can answer positive, or only negative, or even a mixture of the two. So the positives of globalization, economic growth is faster because they have access to the international markets. Employment increases because there's a greater demand for labor, because remember, you are now producing for both the local as well as the international market. Foreign direct investment establishes businesses in other countries. There is improved balance of payments because of more exports. And then at this stage, you wouldn't have dealt with balance of payments yet. So just very quickly, your balance of payments, I like to refer to it as the accounting portion of economics, because this is where we record all the transactions that happens with the outside world. So there's a better balance of payments. Poverty alleviation, because there are more jobs available, there is a reduction in the levels of poverty. The negatives, on the other hand, the economic costs. What we find is that something known as the brain drain. This is when newly qualified graduates or even established qualified people, they will move to developed countries because they get better paid jobs, and smaller countries can't afford the restructuring and reforming of their economies. The social cost is the increase in drug trafficking, abduction, cyber crimes, etc. The health issues, made countries more vulnerable for diseases. Example, bird flu, AIDS, corona, COVID-19. We've seen how quickly that had spread across the globe. And then the environmental costs. This is the major one. It is the depletion of minerals, damage to flora and fauna, land, water, and air pollution. And then your indigenous knowledge systems, communal values, and Ubuntu are lost due to globalization. Right, the North-South divide. What are the causes of the North-South divide? Capitalism. Developed countries accumulate wealth through dispossession at the cost of developing countries. Globalization. It enhances social and economic gaps between countries when richer countries exploit poorer countries. We all know the story about colonization and how that had affected everything. And not that we don't have it today. There's just another way in which they do it. Immigration. People in the South are eager to move to the North for better opportunities and a better standard of living. The rate of development. Countries that has industrialized have higher rates of development than countries that have economies based on agriculture. Emergence of economic powers. Developed countries with access to capital obtain economic power. International infrastructure. Most of the transport systems and telecommunications networks to international markets are in the hands of the North. New technologies. The research, development, and production of new technologies are in the hands of large corporations in the North. Financial aid and debt. Many countries in the South build up huge foreign debts from wealthier countries and struggle to repay their loans. Right, a comparison between developed and developing countries. And as I said, when you're talking about the North-South divide, when you speak about the North, you're talking about developed countries. And if you speak about the South, you're talking about developing countries. And the three things we're looking at here is the standard of living, globalization, and environment. So in the North, your standard of living, approximately 87% of the world's total income is produced by 15% of the total population and live in the economically developed regions of the world. Whereas in the developing countries, we find that when it comes to standard of living, 85% of the world population lives on only 1/5 of the world's income. Life expectancy in the North or in the developed countries is at 75, whereas in the South, it is only at 48. And the reason for this is because of problems with malnutrition, disease, and ill health. Literacy levels in the North is high and everyone is literate, whereas in the South we find that only 46% adult literacy rate and also low standard of living. Globalization. Rich countries subsidize the production of agricultural products, and this makes it difficult for developing countries to compete. And there is an insistence that developing countries should remove tariffs on manufactured goods. And Africa has felt marginalized by subsidies. We find that our farmers find it very difficult to compete on the global market because they don't receive the kinds of subsidies that the rich countries are able to pay their farmers, right? The environment, mass consumption, the North or the industrialized countries, they burn mass quantities of oil and coal, which leads to the destruction of the ozone. Whereas in the South, the focus is on agriculture. So therefore, they need good soil quality, adequate rainfall. Degradation and loss of soil, water, and vegetation are the major environmental problems, and their inability to produce enough food is the major cause of hunger and malnutrition. Right. Globalization is a global phenomena that affects all countries. Write an essay in which you fully discuss the causes and benefits of globalization. As an additional part of your answer, you should refer to the negative effects of globalization. You see there, they're being very specific now. They're asking for the negatives of globalization. So, as an intro, so here's all your tips to answer this question now. So, as an introduction, you can use a definition or description of globalization. And then for your content, they ask you to discuss the causes and benefits of globalization. So if you just go back to the notes there that we've done, there's your definition, right? So you can use that as your definition. That would be your introduction. And then you will talk about the causes of globalization. So we'll have the heading causes, and then you'll put that information in there. And then the consequences, the negatives that you must speak about in your additional part. And then the benefits as well for your body, right? And then your additional answer should refer, for the content of your answer, you must discuss the causes as well as the benefits under separate subheadings, discuss your arguments point by point, but in full sentences, and give examples where possible. Your additional answer should refer to the impact that globalization could have on the inhabitants of the country, the environment, and their economies. But remember, they're looking at the negatives that you need to look at. And then conclude your answer with a well-structured opinion. Right, the last section that we're going to be looking at is environmental deterioration. And in order to master the topic environmental deterioration, you must be able to define and explain the relevant concepts, examine the state of the environment, argue in favor of protecting the environment, analyze the measures or methods used to protect the environment, discuss measures to ensure sustainable development, and discuss the global and local impact on South Africa. Right, so environmental deterioration, the definition: the physical surroundings and physical conditions that affect our lives. The components are the physical resources, example, water, soil, animals, minerals, etc. Space to erect buildings, transport and communication facilities, natural amenities, example, fresh water, animal and plant species. The problems of environmental deterioration. The problems that we have are pollution, and waste from factories and mines pollute the rivers, air, land, and sea. We have overexploitation of natural resources, so the huge demand for resources can lead to a shortage in supply as well as the destruction of the resource. Loss of diversity, habitats decrease that leads to plants and animals becoming extinct. Because what they do is they're clearing forests and all of that so that more housing can be put up or more factories can be built. So they're destroying the habitat of these animals or the plants. So that is the loss of diversity. Waste management, the amount of waste produced increased as economic activities expand. Land degradation, waste disposal, deforestation, and soil erosion leads to land degradation. Climate change, increasing global temperatures have resulted in melting glaciers, rising sea levels, and very destructive, more frequent storms. And lastly, overpopulation. As the world population increases, economies are under pressure to produce more because there's more people to be seen to. Approaches to sustainability. maintaining the ecological balance, improving the quality of human life, achieving economic prosperity, environmental quality, and social equity. Allow generations to live comfortably in a friendly, clean, and healthy environment. And therefore, we see this big move to a more greener economy. Protecting the environment, technological innovations, focus on economic growth while containing pollution. So you're looking at more environmentally friendly ways for production to take place. Price policy, increase the price of non-renewable resources for people who use them inefficiently. Public opinion, concerned citizens lobby for environmental protection. Government action, world summits, laws, international agreements or protocols on pollution and climate change. Vehicle emissions, emissions tax is levied to encourage people to move towards more energy efficient and environmentally friendly vehicles. Industrial waste, the Waste Act 59 of 2008 provide for reduced generation and environmental impact of all form of waste. Ideas for sustainability. Environmental management approach involves freshwater systems, oceans, land, and atmosphere. Private property rights. If people had property rights to fauna and flora species, they would care for them and prevent them from becoming extinct. Focus on externalities. Negative externalities could be tax, command and control system, legislation, prescriptive regulation, and strict enforcement of compliance deals with environmental issues. Voluntary environmental agreements allow organizations to agree to comply voluntarily with environmental laws and regulations. Environmental charges, taxes and subsidies. Local authorities in South Africa impose environmental charges on consumers, businesses and other organizations for sewage disposal and rubbish collection. Ecosystem approach, consider entire ecosystem in decision making. Education, people must learn about the consequences of their actions and the devastation that will be caused by environmental deterioration. So all of these are ways in which we can ensure sustainability. And I think the biggest one amongst all is obviously educating people and making them aware. The global impact on South Africa. We look at the brown issues. Here we're referring to water pollution and water scarcity, air pollution, solid and hazardous waste, and land degradation. So your water pollution and water scarcity, more than 2 million deaths and billions of illnesses annually are caused by water pollution. Health problems are made worse by water scarcity. Air pollution creates chronic health problems, example, lungs, irritation of eyes, nose, mouth, and throat, asthma. Solid and hazardous waste. Waste affects productivity by polluting groundwater resources and endangers plant and animal life. Land degradation. This affects world food security and the quality of the environment. Green issue. Deforestation resulted in loss of economic opportunities, soil erosion, greenhouse effect, loss of biodiversity, leads to an estimated global loss of 20,000 plant and animal species every year. Atmospheric and climate changes leads to extreme weather conditions, example, heat and rain. And so we said we're going to look at the global as well as the local impact. When it comes to the brown issues, increased air pollution, declining air quality are harming people's health, increased soil erosion. The annual soil loss in South Africa is estimated at 300 to 400 million tons. Increased consumption of natural capital. South Africa is using up its natural capital due to overconsumption. Green issues, increased loss of biodiversity. In South Africa, 15% of plant species, 37% of mammal species, 14% of bird species, 8% of amphibian species, and 4% of reptile species are extinct or near extinction. Climate change. The changes to rainfall and temperature are also prevalent in South Africa. Deteriorating freshwater resources. According to the Water Research Commission, South Africa is projected to run out of water between 2020 and 2030, given the current high volumes of wastage and the projected demand. International measures to ensure sustainability. The world's biggest concerns are the loss of biodiversity, toxic and hazardous waste, and climate warming. South Africa is a signatory to a variety of international agreements that deal with environmental issues and environmental sustainability. The World Bank, IMF, United Nations strive to achieve the support and cooperation of all countries for their fight against environmental decay. Examples of international cooperation are the Rio Summit of 1992 and Johannesburg Summit 2002 and the Kyoto Protocol on Climate Change 1997 and 2005. And the Kyoto Protocol has now come to an end. It's not enforced any longer. Right, the consolidation question. Write an essay on environmental sustainability with reference to the following. Discuss state intervention as a measure to ensure environmental sustainability. In addition, explain how a decrease in pollution will affect the condition of the environment. Tips for answering the question. Number 1, the introduction must consist of the definition of a concept that occurs in the question. In this case, your definition is on environmental sustainability and what that is. The content of your question should refer to government action at all 3 levels of government to ensure sustainability. Pay particular attention to controls or laws, pay for use, extension of property rights, and so on. Number 3, to answer the additional part, the impact of reduced pollution on the environment, which is the soil, air, and water, and human health must be addressed. In your concluding remark, refer to your own opinion or statistics regarding the current state of the environment. Now, just to summarize what we've done for this session today, we first looked at the economic pursuits. In session 1, we looked at wealth creation process, economic growth and economic development. And in session 2, we looked at money and banking, globalization, and environmental deterioration. Thank you, grade 11s. We've come to the end of our revision program for terms 3 and 4. Enjoy the rest of your day. you.